So good evening, everyone. I would like to declare the meeting open and welcome all those in attendance. I would like to alert people that this committee meeting is being live streamed and recorded in accordance with the City's Live Streaming and Recording Council meetings policy. And by being present at this meeting, members of the public consent to the City recording and live streaming their image and or voice. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all here, and before commencing the proceedings, I would like to acknowledge that we come together tonight on the traditional land of the Noongar people, and we pay our respects to their elders past and present. I understand that we have no apologies or leave of absence, except for Council... One leave of absence, Councillor Winmar, thank you. Any public questions? None. And no petitions, presentations or deputations? And no presentations. Okay. Declarations of conflicts of interest. Are there any specific conflicts of interest to be declared with respect to this meeting? None indicated. Thank you. Moving to the confirmation of the minutes held on the 17th of February. Could I invite someone to move the acceptance of those minutes? Thank you very much, Councillor. And seconded? Thank you, Councillor Sargent. All those in favour? Nil against? Carried. Moving to item 8, the Audit and Risk Committee Terms of Reference Review. There are a number of changes being suggested by management with respect to our terms of reference. I invite the CEO to introduce this topic, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll hand this over to Russell because he's been working on this report as well as the local government reforms.
Thank you. Through the Chair, as detailed in the report, you'll notice that the Local Government Amendment Act, which is now coming into effect, requires that all local governments in the state amend their audit committee to a Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee. They also require that the committee have independent members sitting as the chair and the deputy chair. So the terms of reference for this committee has been amended to reflect those legislative requirements, which we're currently not 100% clear on when will come into effect. It requires proclamation, but we anticipate that that will occur very soon. So in addition to reflecting those legislative requirements, we've also done an informal review of the terms of reference and compared to other local governments locally, and done a general tidy up to increase readability. But yeah, no significant changes other than the legislative required ones.
So just a quick question from the Chair. Has the legislation been passed yet?
That's correct. The Local Government Amendment Act 2024 has come into effect. The specific requirements, so we can actually see what the requirements are, they just haven't come into effect yet, so that requires proclamation, and we're not 100% clear on when that proclamation will occur.
I see. And a follow-up question, it has to be audit, risk and improvement. That's set in stone.
Yes, that's the information we received from Department of Local Government and the wording within the amendment bill, yep.
Thank you. Open it for questions or comments.
Just a question from me. I think the terms of reference look readable and in line with the Local Government Act and the reforms, which is great. I guess just a reflection for the committee is how we actually include continuous improvement within the committee's remit. That can be through normal standing items, to look at how we improve risk and audit processes. But I've also seen elsewhere where you can include structural components for improvement type of agenda items to really make sure that the improvement element is focused on. So, I guess it's whether or not we're comfortable that we've already have the spirit of continuous improvement, or whether there's additional sort of items that we can do as a committee to get that comfort that we do. We can incorporate continuous improvement going forward as included within the terms of reference.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. Can you elaborate on potential areas that perhaps you see opportunities for us to have greater improvement in? Or is that a question that we could consider between meetings?
I think from an improvement perspective, there's typically sort of items in relation to operational sort of performance as opposed to classical audit and risk items. So I think maybe we'll take one on notice and show you some examples of where other committees have included continuous improvement going forward. I think the heart of this really is that we, as a committee, want to improve. We want to improve our risk and audit processes, which I think through discussion and through the ongoing committee we do generally anyway. So yes, I don't think there's anything sort of major, but I'll share with yourself and maybe the CEO after this session.
Thank you. I wonder, I mean, we do compliance audits, and there's always an element of improvement in them, but we perhaps want to think about having performance-orientated audits specifically. But if there aren't any further questions, obviously part of the ongoing program that we do need to give attention to. CEO?
Through you, Madam Chair. I think just sort of following up on what Ben said, they've left it quite open as to what this improvement actually means from an audit and risk committee part. So I'd look forward to having some discussions with Ben around it. But when you look at how we sort of as an organisation undertake improvement, we're sort of continually doing that through customer service reviews, process reviews. We've got a major focus at the moment around digital transformation. So particularly with our One Council implementation, and now that we've got One Council in, that's only the start of how we can become more efficient and provide better service to the community and how they engage. So I think some of it is around how we report that through to here around some of the process improvements, which would then give you a bit of oversight, and then you could put some of your thoughts too as to how we could do some enhancements in those areas. So we do a lot in that space. I think we just need to look at how we probably report that through to here.
If there are no further questions, there's an officer recommendation. Could I have someone move that recommendation? Thank you very much, Councillor. And seconded, Councillor Ackham. Moving on now to the... Oh, all those in favour? Nil against. Thank you for the prompt. It's a little repetitive, the voting, isn't it? Risk management report. Would management like to introduce this topic?
Through the Chair, just briefly, so we present all our strategic risks in our risk register to this committee at each meeting. We also present all high and extreme residual operational risks. We continue to have no higher extreme rated operational risks for reporting to the committee. In terms of strategic risks, the only significant change I'll highlight is to SR29. It was previously called cybersecurity. We've reassessed that risk and what it actually means for the city. So it's been reworded to failure to adequately deter cybersecurity attacks to reflect what the actual risk to the organisation is. The city is continuing to roll out risk training to key staff. So we've given just recently 45 key staff risk training that's provided via Risk West, and we'll continue to roll that out. We do have a large number of operational risks that, because they aren't higher extreme residually rated, aren't presented to this committee, and we continue to review those risks to make sure there's no duplications and that they are being reviewed regularly and actually reflect the risk to the organisation. So that's a key focus for us in addition to the training we provide staff.
Thank you. Questions or comments, please? Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For SR25, has the 5% progress on the service review been accelerated since this report was done? And a follow-up question to that, what contingency plans are being explored if the review deems continued operation as financially unsustainable. Thank you.
Through the chair, we have progressed, and I will need to take on notice that just before I went on leave, the team were finalising the quoting process. I'll report back on if that has gone out yet. We've been to several meetings now. The department's had several meetings about the changes, and we've met with some consultants to better understand the changes that will impact the retirement village model. It's taken a while for the department to get all information out, so we've been progressing as information's been provided, but I will take on notice and get back about if that review has commenced with the consultant yet.
So, Councillor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question regarding this item as it came up, because I had a question as well, is do we actually have a expected timeline of the impending changes to the Retirement Villages Act? I know that you're saying you're working as it's going, but do we have a D date that we need to be working towards?
Through the chair, if I could, there are a number of changes, some more significant than others, and they vary in terms of the timeline that we have to comply. And it very much depends on the seriousness of those changes and how much it impacts the industry. So obviously, the more significant changes, we've been given greater time frame to implement those changes, but some of the smaller changes, and I couldn't recall what they are off the top of my head, sorry, it's been some time since I've looked at this legislation, but some of the more easier changes do come into effect sooner.
I'll just add more comment onto that as well, sorry, through the chair. The major changes, we have 24 months to transition out once we've got all the information about it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just to clarify, the city is fully, the changes to the Act have happened. It's just now about the timelines of when they are implemented. So there's no further changes coming. It's that we are addressing the changes that have now come in, and it's about the timeline of when they are implemented. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Mr. Arnold?
Through the chair,
Sorry.
I suppose just a reflection is we've continued to get these sort of risk reports since the new system, and I think the quality of information continues to get better and better. So as they're sort of looking through this, you're looking for the completeness of the risk register, are we regularly reviewing risks and controls, etc., and noting particularly the large number of risks that were reviewed in May just shows that it's an active sort of process reflecting those sort of controls and improvement plans, which is great. Through the chair, just had one question. With those large number of risks that were reviewed, were controls reviewed at the same time, and particularly sort of preceding those to inform the risk assessments?
Through the chair, yes, the risk itself will have its own review date, but all the controls have a separate review date, and they can align depending on what the control is and what the risk is. But yeah, they very much within the system have their own separate review date, which the officer has to comply with.
Cool, thank you. Through the chair, maybe a suggestion in terms of reporting is for the sort of risks, and you can see an example of SR25 when the next review date is. It'd be quite useful to know when the actual control was reviewed also, because that will give a useful bit of information for when the control was reviewed as well as the risk was reviewed. I did have one sort of question in relation to SR30, which I believe is on page 42. The question was, IT disaster recovery plan control title is partially effective. Generally that's quite a critical control across a large number of sort of risks. Just want to get some more supporting information for for that control rating, because there doesn't seem to be too many additional risk actions relating to that partially effective control.
Through the chair, SR30 failure to deliver business continuity. It seems to be substantially effective rating. Perhaps taking your comment on board, we could go away and assess that risk again.
Cool. I guess, yeah, through the chair, I guess just looking for any sort of controls. If it's less than effective, generally would have supporting actions to bring that control back to the appropriate effectiveness level. So just the process, sort of observation, and I guess secondly as well, the next review date, 1st of April 2026 is quite a long time away. So it's just encouraging when we do have controls that are ineffective or partially effective to have the review cycles in a bit shorter time period.
Through you, Madam Chair. I actually think that one might be an error. So this one, as you know, has gone through quite a comprehensive review. We've done some testing on it. We've, in regards to IT disaster recovery plan, so the IT team now have got their own separate disaster recovery plan. We've got quite comprehensive cybersecurity. In fact, they've got, what's the manual called? The cybersecurity manual, and everything sits within that. So I think that one there is effective, but I think what they've done is they've taken a very pessimistic view of the world. So we'll do a review on it, but you're quite correct. It shouldn't be 1 April 26. That one, at least, because of all the IT issues, in terms of the changing environment, should be reviewed a lot more frequently. So we'll follow up on that one and come back to you.
Great, thank you. Just one query, just on page 25, gives us a box summary in terms of the risks, as well as the risk by ratings residual. Through the chair, can I suggest the inherent risk summary detail be provided as well within that box? And I suppose the reason I ask is, so reviewing it, you wouldn't expect to see too many extreme risks or high risks necessarily from a residual perspective, because that means that the risks after the controls form at that level. But I'd say quite unusual to not have any high residual risks at all. And I guess there's a converse of that. It's good management of risk, and I think we sort of see the processes, etc. But just whether or not we're downgrading sort of the risks or overestimating controls and effectiveness of those ratings. So I think having high risks is okay, especially for strategic risks or risks that we don't have control over. So that was my reflection point. It's good not maybe to have high risks if that's correct, but I would generally expect to see some high risks from a strategic nature. So I guess maybe just maybe a sort of comment in terms of the process would be great. No further questions from me.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had one more question on page 34 for SR2. In your risk review comments, you're saying regarding a comprehensive review of this risk item is presently being conducted. Is there a date of the current review available, and should this be displayed in the risk overview panel to when part of the comments are that while something is in process, even if it's a ballpark date to go, we're doing this. So by the next audit and risk meeting, we plan to be done, or this is a comprehensive piece of work and it could take 8 months, or that sort of thing going forwards.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. So this one, if you recall, so the financial ratios used to sit within the annual reports and be reported on by OAG. They've now been pulled out, so it's not forming part of that. Though now, if you recall, they're in the long-term financial plan, so it's come to Audit and Risk Committee tonight. So the finance team have gone through and reviewed a lot of those financial ratios, and they're now in the LTFP, which was picked up through our strategic community plan review. So that review date is pretty much aligned as to that review which it's talking about.
Just one question from the chair. Referring back to SR 25, the retirement estate, am I correct in saying or understanding that we will be doing a review of this facility in mid this year? That's the scope we're calling?
Yeah, through the chair, yes, we'll be reviewing the service, the involvement of local government delivering the service and the legislation and the impact of the legislation on running the retirement village as well.
Yeah, because it's not, I mean, it's not really, the changes to the legislation's one thing, but it's really whether this is considered core business of the council and whether the council's the best organisation to operate such a facility. So I'm just confirming that the scope will look at those strategic questions, not just the legislative changes and financial impact.
It will be looking at both the legislated changes and the level of the responsibility of local government and the city running the service, and if it's something that we continue in the future as well.
Thank you. Turning to the recommendation. I'm happy to move from the chair the officer recommendation, seconded by the mayor. All those in favour? Carried, nil against. The next item is the council policy review update. We'll take that paper as read, but I'd invite management to introduce the item.
Through the chair, the review of all council policies is progressing quite well. We've got 13, we're down to only 13 policies due for review at this point in time, 8 of which are being presented at the upcoming 25th of June meeting, so that'll leave only 5 in need of review. One of those is the access to information policy. We were waiting on the template communications policy being issued by state government. That's now come out, so that will spur our review of that policy in the immediate future. The remaining 4 policies due for review will be reviewed between now and December by the various teams. So overall, we're happy with the progress of this. It's coming along nicely. Only a few policies outstanding for review.
Thank you. I have one question, if I may. The use of corporate credit cards is an area that's recently been focused on by the Office of the Auditor General. It was found, fortunately, that there was no inappropriate behaviour. However, policy was criticised for lacking clear guidelines. My question relates to whether in reviewing the policies that particular issue has been addressed, for the benefit of councillors and staff.
Through the chair, if I might. Yes, we did note the detailed findings of that OAG audit. So although that policy is not technically due for a review, given those findings do have some implications for us, we will be reviewing that, and that's been commenced between myself and the Chief Financial Officer here at the city. So we will be reviewing. We've actually started the review of that policy, and we'll be making sure we include all those recommendations. So that's actually started.
Okay, well that's good. It's good to learn from other people's experiences. Any questions or comments from the rest of the committee? Mr. Arnold?
Just one reflection and not dissimilar comment to I think the last update is, I think on page 45, It references council policies serve as high-level statements that articulate the intent behind the city's strategic objectives and guide its operations, but a lot of the policies are things like scattering of ashes, keeping of dogs, bicycle parking, etc. So the question is, in terms of, are those actually strategic documents? Should they be defined as policies? And there might be requirement for business standards or procedures, work instructions, etc. But if we're spending time on things which aren't of those strategic nature, is that a good use of time?
Through you, Madam Chair, that is a very good question. Answer to that is you're absolutely right. There's a lot of policies that we have that probably shouldn't be council policies. They're not strategic in nature. They're more sort of operational. So part of the review, which Russell has mentioned, is that we're actually going through and looking at what's the intent of that policy and whether that can actually be covered by an operational guideline. So we are looking to reduce down a number of them.
Thank you. Maybe just as a follow-up for future updates, if we are retiring those documents, it would be good to understand that those which are in review and also being retired. No further questions.
Have all the policies that have been reviewed, are they now up on the council website?
Yes, they immediately upon being endorsed by council go on our website via our marketing team.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My only question would be, this is fantastic, or comment/question, fantastic work from where you were with the log of policies that were potentially overdue to getting to this fantastic number. I guess, again, maybe sort of side noting to what Mr. Arnold said, was going forwards, while we're working on what is overdue, are we technically what we should have been doing? Are we falling behind again in this process? Like with our next batch of policies, it's great to tidy up the overdue ones, but does this mean we're falling behind in this future lot of what should be looked at?
Through you, Madam Chair. Probably the short answer to that one is no. So we've now got a process in place where this report comes to ELT regularly. It's also on the senior management team. Russell then covers that off. So managers are fully aware so that they start the process early. It's something that we've been trying for some time, but we've had such a large backlog to catch up on. So.
I guess the other point that I'd like to make is that as community expectations, the law, best practice changes, it's not only the policies we have, but the policies that we need. Yeah. So I'm assuming there's a process by which we identify and benchmark against others. Thank you. If there are no further questions, we have an officer recommendation. Could I have a mover? Thank you very much, Councillor. Seconded. Thank you very much, Mayor. All those in favour? Nil against. The motion's carried. And thank you very much for all the work that's being done on those policies. It's very hard, indeed, impossible to audit against an area if it doesn't have any policies to guide the way we do things. Moving to item 8.4, the audit action log progress report. Thank you.
Through the Chair. So this report presents all outstanding internal audit actions and external audits for that matter. So you'll note from reviewing that report that a significant number of outstanding actions have been finalised since the committee's February meeting. There's nothing significant to draw your attention to in that regard. 2 audit actions have been added to the audit log. Those are the last 2 actions. They result from the recently completed OAG interim financial audit. So that's delays on updates of interim valuation reports, and the second action is inadequate stock take governance for plant equipment and fleet assets. There's several audits currently being undertaken. Those findings will be presented to the committees either September or November. meetings depending on when we receive the finalised outcomes of those audits. So we've got the OAG IT audit, which is currently being undertaken. OAG are currently completing the gifts and benefits audit. The OAG annual financial audit is also going to be undertaken shortly. The planning document was attached to this report for the committee's noting. And then we've also engaged jointly with the City of Cockburn a external firm to undertake both local governments' fleet management. That's primarily fleet vehicles. So that's being undertaken with the City of Cockburn, as I mentioned. So all those audit findings will be presented to either September or November meetings, depending on when we get the results.
Thank you. I was surprised that we don't have a formal stock take procedure for plant and equipment. So I'm not clear as to how the stock take's been done in the past. Are you able to perhaps provide some insight on that and the credibility of past stock takes?
Through the chair, just to be clear, it's not stock take of consumables. So we do have a system of checking stock, oils, filters, those types of things. So this is the allocation of minor plant onto trucks. Because we have quite a small workforce, we've never had any concern that we're missing equipment. There's a fairly standard allocation of equipment to each truck, and most other gear is stored in the workshop and then allocated out as they are needed. But once we've had this finding, we've reflected on it, and we've decided it's quite simple to do that. So we have a standard allocation per truck, so we'll document that and then have a regular inspection of the truck to count the gear, make sure it's still on there, and then making sure that we're recording the ins and outs of gear that's additional to the truck as and when they're requested.
So these items are, for example, shovels, or what would they be?
Through the chair, it could be a shovel or a whippersnapper or a blower, but they're fairly big bits of equipment, and if they're missing, and that's why it's never been a concern that that type of thing might go missing. You'd certainly know if they were missing because the job wouldn't be done. But yes, it could include shovels and the like, so having some sort of system to pick that up would probably be what the auditor is after.
Thank you. Open to questions. Thank you, Councillor.
Just as a question as to why, or a point of clarity, there's a couple of times through the audit document, like on page 55, where you've got a status as being complete, and you've got the approved or proposed completion date as the 30th of June 2025. I know it's a minor detail, but at the time of presenting the report, it's not the 30th of June 2025, and we are saying it's complete as that date. So it's either almost complete right now, or it was complete as of the 7th of June. Just as a query as to why that is through the report, please.
Yeah, through the chair. So the proposed completion date is, in the first instance, generated at the time the audit report is completed. So it's the date that we say here at the city we're going to complete the action by. So where you note that there's a line through that original date and there's a new date put, that's when we've had to go and revise that date because we've, for whatever reason, been able to meet the originally set date. So the status, when the status is marked as being complete, what the officer is saying is that we've done all the actions required to satisfy ourselves that we have addressed the audit finding. So that generally occurs, well, in an ideal world, and for the most part, prior to the proposed completion date. So in that instance, although we haven't achieved the proposed completion date, the officer's suggesting that they've completed all the findings and that item can be marked, notwithstanding that the date hasn't been achieved, if that makes sense.
Thank you, through the chair. I appreciate your comments. I guess just for an independent party looking at this audit log, whether it's a slight change of the wording, like I understand you've got a proposed completion date, but if you're putting the word complete on an audit log, it is complete of a set, like what was the date of completion? Like if you look at actions below in the statuses, you have dates, and then it's okay, that is now complete as of the, for example, on page 26, the manager of human resources put in on the 21st of May, the date. Like, I know it's kind of a slight pedantic thing, but it's just about using the word complete and a date that is set in a future.
Okay, so just for clarity, would the word completed, i.e. completed by now, this point in time, the proposed completion date was 30th of June, but as at this meeting, it's now completed. Would that perhaps address that? Great. Okay. Thank you for that suggestion.
Still not getting it.
It's fine. It's a semantics issue.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
So, any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Arnold.
Thank you. Through the chair, just on that same page, for Australian auditors, the two issues are marked as status closed, but the remaining are complete. What's the difference between complete and closed?
Through the chair. So this document receives the input of a number of officers that are responsible for the various actions. So unfortunately, in this instance, the terminology hasn't been quite consistent between the amendment to the document. So ideally, that should have been marked as completed rather than closed. I'm not sure why they've used different terminology, but it's just someone else has amended this document that hasn't been consistent in the terminology.
Yeah, that's fine. Sometimes it's closed because we haven't addressed the issue, but we're comfortable with it. So that's the only reason. If it's completed, then that's fine. I did have a question. I want to use an example. Was on page 62. There's an issue relating to the safety review of the Aquatic Centre, and it's the top issue. Which is the last comment was accounting software has been put on hold until the refurbishment. However, we've self-assessed that as closed. Reading that comment, it doesn't appear that issue is closed. Can I just confirm the status of that?
Through the chair, looking at the terminology there, you are right, it needs to be included in the review of the upgrade of the facilities. So I guess in this instance it is actually, I'd probably say put on hold to consider the upgrade and how we incorporate counting software in the future facility. So I think would it be fair to refine that one?
Through you, Madam Chair. So this one here, it's probably the terminology around the close. So this was done as part of the internal audit. The internal auditor picked up around the accounting software, so known patrons going in and out. It's not, it wouldn't be cost effective and feasible to do it at this point in time when you're going to go into a major refurbishment. So this will be moved into the whole refurbishment process, and so they would get picked up through that, which is why the reason saying it's closed, because it will be done as part of the refurbishment.
Just as a comment, I did see this through a number of the audit actions, is there's a number of actions which is currently scheduled for future work. So I guess it's just the process for which we're happy to close those, because the example beneath that is not dissimilar, where it's closed but it's considered as part of the refurbishment. And there's other ones a little bit sort of further on referencing future activities. So I guess from my perspective, future actions wouldn't constitute an audit close. You typically keep the audit action open. I think if the decision is to not progress through and include that as analysis, then that could be a basis for closing it. But I think would rather, if we're going to close issues, that actions actually sort of being completed, we've confirmed it, because quite often we can have actions that we have the best intents of closing it in the future. However, it doesn't happen for whatever reason. So maybe just through the chair, just to comment, I guess, in terms of the principles for which we're comfortable for closing those. Are we comfortable to to only close it once the actions have been completed, or like are we sort of comfortable with if we've got future actions that are locked in?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think picking up on your point, and these like taking these ones which are a good example, is what we're really doing is placing them. They're still remaining open because they'll be picked up as part of the specifications for the aquatic upgrade. And then it's just making sure that as we do the specifications for the aquatic upgrade and then go to design process and then through to tender to make sure that we haven't counted. So I think what we do is we'll keep them open, but have them sort of as a monitor through the other process.
I don't think there's a choice. If they haven't been implemented, then we can't say they're closed or completed. But there is an example on page 66. This is about the essential services, parking infringements and pet registration. The comment there is manager essential services completion currently scheduled for June 2025. Efforts are ongoing to ensure all requirements are met within the revised timeline and then complete. Now that's not the aquatic area, so it's got nothing to do with refurbishment. So it sort of seems as if perhaps there's just been a bit of a pivot around the process of closing things out. So happy to take a input on that.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. I think this is a bit like the risk education process. We need to give a bit more training to the managers as to how they're putting the comments into this. So I'm not completely sure on this one, but I think we just need to educate them around the comments in terms of the actions that they've actually undertaken.
Yes, I think training's important, but I think overview of what goes in and some questioning around the comments is a really important quality check as well.
Yeah.
So I'm pleased that progress is being made, but I think we do need to go back to first principles, and if there's still work to be done, we can't log it as complete or closed. We really have to have it as an open item.
So, Russell, on this one, are you aware of what's been undertaken?
Through the chair, and this particular audit action, I understand from speaking to the manager that he was confident and was certain that this would be completed within the time frame, but because he provided me these comments several weeks ago, the information he wanted to convey to this committee was that it would be completed as at this date.
Okay, so I think if we accept the comments in that spirit under status, but under the proposed completion date where it says complete and it's not complete based on the measure that we've outlined, then at the next audit committee meeting, if we could have an update and only things either open or close, and if they're not complete, they're not closed. So could we perhaps look at the sorry, are there any other questions? Thanks,
Sorry,
Mr. Arnold.
There was two interim findings relating to the OAG sort of audit
Yep.
of medium and sort of low. I think both those actions were completed 30th of June. Are those still on track for completing?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, they are. Let me just go back to them.
It's the interim valuation, 79.
Yeah, on page 79.
I think, particularly one, the interim valuation reports, and noting down that in terms of the transitioning, I think it was going to, processing the valuations was
Yeah,
scheduled.
they are on track.
Okay, great. And yeah, just a reflection, good result in terms of an interim audit, just to have one medium and low finding.
Yeah, very good result.
And nothing from the prior year, so that's excellent.
Which, do they test the prior year during the interim as well?
Yes,
Absolutely.
Good result.
yes.
Cool. No further questions.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Thank you, Councillor.
Just as a point of clarity, the audit log on page 69 regarding the investment of surplus funds, I understand when you read the finding, it talks about going through the review process of the policy. I'm just wondering if it would be best practice when we're looking at the status. So you've got that the policy has been reviewed, but now that it's reviewed, have we implemented the new policy in the investment stakeholder to actually negate the risk? It's great that we've got to the point that we've gone through the process and looked at our investing, but the end result was to have the financial surety of being in multiple pots to protect the city. Has that action actually happened? Because obviously the risk itself was just about the policy measure. I guess that would be the final step of this particular risk.
Through you, Madam Chair. So yes, so all the investments have been reviewed and they are also reported as part of the monthly financial report through to council, and you can see the breakdown of those investments. So they are aligned.
So the officer recommendation with respect to this item is that we note the status of the outstanding audit actions as detailed, and I think it does need some additional words around there with respect to the audit log will be refreshed to reflect the clarity around the interpretation of closed/completed. With those amendments, I'd like to put forward that alternate recommendation from the chair. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, councillor. All those in favour? Nil against, the motion's carried. There is a second part to this in attachment B. Just turning to that page now. And this is the Office of the Auditor General's annual financial audit planning summary. Now, we don't have anyone from the OAG here today, but I understand there were some items that, an item about the exit interview that we wanted to emphasise. The date?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. So the date for the exit interview has changed a number of times, and that's now been brought forward to, I think, the 22nd of November.
Yes, 20th of November.
And so the intention is that the Audit and Risk Committee meeting for December will be moved forward to that date to enable the auditors to come and present the exit interview.
So I've notified of the officers that I'll be participating in that meeting now because of the change of dates online. Yep, thank you. Are there any discussion on this topic? If not, we have an officer's recommendation. Do I have someone to move that, please? Thank you.
It was all part of the...
It was all part of the one.
Yeah.
Didn't read as that though, did it? Oh, trying to move my screen up. I beg your pardon, it was carried before. Thank you. It was attachment A and attachment B. Yeah, okay. Thank you. The next item, 200 pages of the next item is a series of documents. I think I'll pass to the CEO to take us through this one.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you, Madam Chair. So this one here is the culmination of a huge amount of work, and first off I just want to pay particular comment to Doug for leading this, as well as Alicia, our what do we call her?
Integrated planning.
Integrated Planning Officer. She's a fantastic person. And so there was a huge amount of workshops that were done, not only with the council, but with the community. There was a lot of surveying, engagement with the community to review the strategic community plan. It's come up with a new vision. It's come up with new strategic outcomes, new strategic objectives. We've been able to align a lot of the community's priorities, which we check through doing market surveying of the community, which then enables us to ensure that we get better alignment of our services that we deliver to the community. The council also went through and reviewed all the levels of service that we deliver. Then sitting behind the strategic community plan, we have a lot of documents which then support that. So you have the workforce plan, which Sue and the team have gone through and reviewed to make sure that we've got the right, basically the right people with the right skills in the right place at the right time. We've also then reviewed our infrastructure strategy to make sure that we've got the right levels of service going across our assets, that we've got the right assets. One of the things which I think Gay has picked up is that when you look at some of our reserves, they do drop down in the foreseeable future, and then they start to pick up. It is something as a growth council that we have always struggled with in terms of the amount of funding going into asset renewal, because we have a lot of new assets coming on, which then require to be maintained. And in the next few years, we've got some major projects taking place, which are obviously significant renewals. So that's pulling on those reserves. Council has agreed to put some additional funding into that reserve in the next budget year. And we're sort of planning to do that again sort of going forward. And you'll see in the next few years, the asset reserve starts to pick up. So you've got an infrastructure strategy that supports it, and then sitting across all of that, you've got the long-term financial plan, which then provides all the funding to enable to deliver upon the strategic community plan and the corporate business plan that sits with it. I think what the SCP and the corporate business plan now shows is a lot of alignment with all our strategies. You can clearly see how we're delivering things against the community's priorities, particularly in the area of social, environmental and economic. So there's really good connections across that. The challenge always is, it's always funding, and that sort of comes through in the LTFP. But I think the council has a good understanding of what some of those pressures are and how to manage that over the future. So a lot of work. They look fantastic. But they provide a really good roadmap going forward.
Thank you very much. Open it for discussion. I did have conversation with the CEO earlier today, just on these documents. Just by way of summary, on page 174, there's mention of what's happening outside the city of Kwinana around the AUKUS and defence strategies. So the need to obviously be looking forward to how that will inevitably impact the city. I also am looking for the page that the reference to the funding is on. Sorry, I should have marked the page. But it does show a graph of where our reserves are declining, and due to the capital works program, there's an anticipation of debt finance. So that makes both good business sense if the assets need replacing and can't be replaced out of reserves, funded out of reserves, but it does raise a risk to the city that will require close management.
Oh, can I just put it?
Yeah, sure.
Through Madam Chair, just a comment in regards to that. So obviously one of the biggest projects that we've got coming up is the renewal of the aquatic centre. But the opportunity was too great to pass up on accessing $15 million of federal government grant funding for that. So the city looked to reprioritise this project, which was sitting in the future, to bring it forward. So that has put a little bit of pressure on the reserves, which we're managing through debt, through loans.
Yep.
But then that's why you see the drop, and then it'll start to pick up in the future. But yeah, too big an opportunity to pass up 15 million.
Yeah, thanks. So is that in the order of $37 million, that project?
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, and
It's huge, isn't it?
that's a figure that we are absolutely determined to try and stick to. Stick to.
Yeah, okay. Yep, I mean, grants are hard to resist, but they still have to be managed.
Correct.
Okay. Any further questions? I mean, it is a real testament to the team, the high quality of this document and the way it's integrated is the important point, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing, is it's the integration of all the plans now, where before they sort of sat in isolation, now they're fully integrated.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Arnold.
Yeah, just in terms of reflection, the interconnectivity of all the different elements was evident, like through the various sort of documents. So that was great from a process and governance perspective. I had a couple of questions. Just want to run through. Just on page 243, gives a bit of background for the long-term financial plan. And just noting that last year we adopted a 10-year plan, and this year, due to changes, we did a revised plan. It's quite unusual to do a revision of the long-term plan the following year afterwards, and it highlights some of the reasons for that. Maybe getting any sort of additional sort of context for for some of the sort of drivers for redoing that 10-year plan.
Yeah, so obviously there's a couple of changes. One was, so CPI has been changing relatively quickly. Obviously the grant funding that we received as well required a major readjustment to it. That wasn't announced until late in the year on that part. And then of course the other thing too, which is mentioned in here, is we're in industrial negotiations at the moment, and that's probably, I've reported to council, a major risk that we have at the moment, and so that has picked up on some of the challenges that we're sort of having through it. So when you take all those factors, it required a review of the LTFP, but then also with the strategic community plan going through a major review, and council picking up on some key initiatives to undertake, we had to align our financials with undertaking some of those initiatives.
So to ensure that interconnectivity going forward, presumably that long-term plan will go hand in hand with the community.
Correct.
Yep. Okay. Great. Thank you. It's a question from a risk side. Were any risk assessments performed or being planned on the strategic community plan?
Through you, Madam Chair, there's risks. So basically we have a risk register that sits across all of it, and then within each of those projects there is risk registers that sit to each of those risks, to each of those projects as well. So we're sort of managing it by project, but then also taking a global helicopter view across the whole budget as well.
Right. I think through the chair, at a point in time, incorporating those project or siloed risks within the organisation's risk register would be consideration, because there'd be quite good interconnectivity. I think one example of a key theme is in page 292, where we detail climate change effects, impacts and risks. That's quite often a strategic risk for a lot of organisations, so it could be an example where if you're considering risk events or how that theme is included within your risk profile, that might be sort of consideration, because a lot of the work that's sort of done as part of that process can then ultimately make the current risk register more robust and more complete.
Just quickly on that one through you, Madam Chair. So the intention is, so Russell mentioned that we're still finishing off doing the risk management training with staff. The intention is to do a strategic risk review with the executive leadership team and a couple of other key people. So we'll look to pick a lot of that up as part of that review.
Another sort of reference, we talked around improvement earlier on, being part of the remit going forward. I think on page 108, it references that the new community plan introduces the city's performance monitoring framework. There's likely to be sort of quite fruitful information that ties through to risk and governance. So maybe through the chair, having visibility of some of that sort of information might be sort of meaningful for the committee to allow to review that information hand in hand with sort of risk and audits, etc. as well.
Can I just clarify? So are you talking about in the SCP we've now got a performance measurement framework? Are you talking about that one?
Yes, yeah, the one that's a reference on page 108. That we
Yeah. Yep. So the intention was to look to do that through our quarterly reporting and then obviously through the annual report. Do you want it a little bit more visible than through that report?
I think it's an inform. I don't think it's not, I suppose, a core part of what the committee does. I think an exec overview, like type of level information,
Yep.
would be
Okay.
sufficient. Yeah. No further questions from me.
Just one tiny comment, well, not tiny, but to the team behind this. I've only been on council for 2 years, but the transparency and accountability and clear communication to, I guess, your ratepayers that you serve, especially around the asset renewal transparency. It's not, we just need this money from you for a hypothetical. You have really clearly broken down, and in the workforce planning, your I guess, value on tacit knowledge and not wanting to lose that within the city. I just commend you for putting together something of this level that as to the community, which I see as a risk, to go here, this is exactly what we're doing. There's no cloak and mirrors. If you are truly interested and would like to know, that it is all laid there, and you have pretty graphs, and it's so lovingly put together. It's an easy read versus some high-level strategic document. So just fantastic work, team, in what you have put together here.
Well said. Thank you for that. I have two questions, follow-up questions. One is about how does the city monitor the performance of progress against the plan? Is that through the quarterly reports and the annual report? And is it clear with respect to the whole plan?
Yeah, so through you, Madam Chair. So basically the strategic community plan then goes through to the corporate business plan. The corporate business plan goes across 4 years, and then you have your annual plan, which then does the 1 year. So we implemented a couple of years ago now, doing quarterly reporting to councils, and a lot of councils do that. So that's how we pick up on how we're performing against that annual plan, and then against the corporate business plan as well.
Thank you. In the officer's recommendation, there's a note 4 around the State Underground Power Program. We're being asked to acknowledge the general support for that. Would you be able to speak to that, please?
Through the chair, so the community consultation process for the strategic community plan, there was a check-in part of that process. So after we had worked through the community, worked with the council, developed the strategic community plan draft, we went back to the community as a check-in. And one of the things we checked in with the community was the state underground power program, because the state government has come to the city of Kwinana and said that a lot of your overhead lines are coming to end of life with between the next 3 to 25 years, and what's your community position if we can get maximum funding. So because of the way the funding works, we're eligible for maximum funding. So working with Western Power, we developed up what that would cost per property, and as part of the consultation, which aligns with some of the outcomes of the strategic community plan, particularly around streetscapes and maintaining trees and canopy cover. We asked that question of our community: if it was to cost you within 3 years' time $3,500, and we were to have in place a mechanism to spread that cost over a number of years, would you be supportive of that? And we had 75% support for that concept.
Through the chair, as a follow-up, yes, noted in terms of the proceed, 74%. What were the numbers of response to make up that 74%?
I'll have to get back. If they're not in here, then I'll have to come back to you on that. But the process, this is part of our check-in, so it's already gone through the process to determine that our community had support for, and actually it's a high priority for your community, the streetscapes and trees. The process to do the check-in was our normal media type process, but also the roadshow where we went and visited our community at different venues, our seniors, our community groups, our local markets, the shopping centre, that type of thing. So we tried to get the community every chance we got to get that feedback.
Maybe through the chair, I suppose the reason for the question is, 74% is great in terms of percentage, but if it's quite a low number in terms of representation, I think of the consultation projects, that's one of the lower approvals to proceed, and the rest are above sort of 80%. So it's just a sort of question around the sort of numbers, given that it is a financial impost to ratepayer. So just keen to know, is that sort of representative, and how far reaching do we seek that consultation? Cool.
Mr. Arnold, do you have a concern about the wording of point 4?
I acknowledge the general support. I think, well, for me, a key bit would be, I've got a percentage, but don't really understand the number as compared to, to how we've sort of engaged. So if it's 74% of 10 people, for instance, I'd say no. But so I suppose that's the basis of my acknowledging if the community said yes, then would approve.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'll send the numbers out to you because I can't recall exactly off the top of my head, but it's around 350 responses. So the team went to things like the Honeywood Market. They did stalls there. The consultation document went to every house. It was available in the libraries, etc. I think one of the reasons for pulling this one out, though, is, once again, this is an area that it's not really local government's responsibility to do. We get tasked to do it. It gets put onto us. It is a significant cost, which the community have said that they're happy to pay to achieve that outcome. So the reason for pulling it out is just to show that there has been support for it, because, once again, this will be a cost that will go on to the rate notice in the future. And it's just acknowledging that there has been community support for it.
I guess, through the chair, it's references in terms of access to pre-funding arrangements. Presumably, if there's risk of defaults against that pre-funding, is that something that the council will sort of bear, or is there who holds the liability?
Through the chair, just as a point of clarity, one of the reasons we want the resolution to be specific, because a lot of actions in the strategic community plan are quite operational and we will just get on and deliver it. But we have to enter into a memorandum of understanding with Western Power for them to continue. It doesn't actually lock us in, but we need a bit more than a priority for our streetscapes and trees. So we asked that question specifically. In terms of funding, that's not finalised, and that's why the resolution says that's still to be worked through. But the proposal is it would be pre-funded through a self-supporting loan, where the community, the individual property can then pay that back over a period of time. So we would do it in the same way as other local governments in Western Australia have done it.
Okay. So just clarity from my side. So whilst we sort of coordinate the access to the pre-funding arrangement, we don't administer the payment, like the $3,500. Like we don't sort of we don't take any sort of financial exposure to that.
Through you, Madam Chair. So it's quite a complex process in terms of setting up the funding arrangements, and having been involved with it through a house that I lived in. So the arrangement that the resident has with the council is that, so that, as Doug has said, call it a figure of $3,500, which is paid back over a number of years. There's quite a complex arrangement which is in place. If the house is sold, then it gets paid back straight at that time. So the risk to the council is actually quite low in terms of that debt.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, thank you. I was just obviously was keen just to understand the impacts. Or I suppose there's default sort of risk, but then there's administration increased sort of costs if there's an ongoing requirement for the council to utilise resources.
Just a sort of final point on this. This whole undergrounding of power has actually been a lot of discussion between local government, Walga, and state government. Not fully understanding electricity, but by putting the lines underground, it's actually has a huge amount of benefit to Western Power in terms of reducing their risk and reducing their cost in maintaining the lines. But we're expecting the community to pick up quite a significant proportion of those costs. They should be sort of really managing that. We've been trying to push that. You've got some parts of Perth where the community can afford it, and they've just gone out and said to Western Power, we want it done now, and so they've gone ahead. So it's not a clean process, but there is a very clean process in terms of how the work is undertaken, the agreements that are put in place, and then how you fund it.
Thank you. One final sort of comment. The recommendation makes sense to me. What's the reference to an equitable way? Because I understand affordable and efficiency. What's the equitable component referring to?
Through the chair, there's some detail to be sorted out with regard to the amount of power needed to be provided to a particular property, but also location of transformers. So it may be, as we work it through, adjustments are made. If your property gets a transformer, for instance, you might get a discounted rate compared to other properties. So the equity is about sharing the cost and the implications of the project. But I mean, the other part of it is if you've got a workshop at the back of your property and you need a bigger power connection, then logically you'd pay a slightly higher price than a residential property next door.
Cool. That makes sense. Cool. No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a really interesting discussion. What I'm understanding is that the officer's recommendation is to acknowledge the general support based on the information that's been given or will be confirmed. That this is very high level early days, that the council has been briefed on the initiative, but the final arrangements with Western Power and the community would come forward in some sort of business paper, I assume, for this committee's review potentially, but at least the council's acceptance. Okay. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, through the chair, that's correct. And just another point of clarity, it's about 3 years away at the earliest. So it's really at this point just indicating a general support for, yes, our community wants to do this, because Western Power has to invest in design to fully work up the cost to make sure that when we enter into the agreement there's no surprises. But it is several years down the track, so there is time to work this up and then recheck support.
So the acknowledgement of the general support in no way binds. We don't have any binding authority here at this committee, and there is a process for it to be reviewed and approved, and the risk to be reviewed in the future. Okay, thank you. That's useful clarification. It just seemed quite a specific area to be brought out in the overall officer recommendations, hence the discussions, but it's been useful. So I am happy to put the motion. Do we have someone to move the motion? Thank you, Councillor. Seconded. Councillor. All those in favour? All those in favour? Thank you. Nil against. Carried. Item 8.6, the WHS statistical report. Thank you.
Through the chair, of note, since the last Audit and Risk Committee meeting, the city has undertaken it's called the 3 Steps to Safety Assessment by LGIS, who were the third-party auditors who audit across local governments around the work health and safety framework, the processes and the procedures. So we've undertaken step 1, which was the assessment. We've received the results of the assessment, an overall score for the 6 categories that were assessed of 178 out of 192, which is a 93%, which equates to what is a gold award. Of note is that the 2 areas, the management commitment and the volunteer management, were at 100%. Which particularly with the volunteer management is that with the changes to the work health and safety legislation, we've taken on the volunteer bushfire brigades, and so a lot of their documentation, the audit went out to one of the brigades to the stations, and so it was very pleasing to see such a high result in that area. So we've completed step 1. Usually with step 2, the auditor produces the action plan. However, as I was speaking to the auditor and in the area of training and supervision, I'd already put some things in place, which we've already commenced. So I was permitted to prepare the action plan, which is the attachment B, and that was then submitted through to the auditor, who has accepted the auditor. So from here we will be implementing the actions out of the action plan, and that will be presented through to the Audit and Risk Committee meetings in the future.
Thank you. Open for discussion.
Thanks for the update, and in terms of the conclusion of the report, so very positive, and obviously there's a few areas for consideration and close out, but obviously it's a strong audit result, so congratulations. Is the intent for this table that we have on the screen now to be included as part of the audit action log? Because my suggestion that it, you obviously don't want it to duplicate, however, audit actions relating to health and safety, which forms part of general risk and audit, it'd probably be worthwhile to consider.
Through your chair, we have had a discussion about this where we were looking at whether to include that into the audit log. At this point, we just left it and open to suggestions here.
Sorry, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, through Madam Chair. So we've had a bit of discussion around this one. I think there's, with the way that we've structured the health and safety committees and the process that we have, I'd probably prefer to keep this one separate from the audit log and have it managed through the work health and safety committees, through our work health and safety strategy and the action plan that sits within that. It certainly could sit as part of our work health and safety report here, which comes through in that regards, because we also bring through an update in terms of our strategy. I think it's probably the cleanest way to do. I'd rather keep it separate.
Cool. Yeah, through the chair, in terms of just an update as part of this process would work well. And I think a number of those natures are, another audit actions are fairly minor by sort of nature. So, yeah, so that sort of works well. Perhaps just an update in terms of progress. There is one particular finding I wanted to get some more information on, and it's on page 358, and it's element 5.7. It's around recommendation to provide formal and structured training on work health and safety roles and responsibilities. That's generally sort of quite a core activity, and I know we've referenced that has occurred in the past, so just wondering why that observation was raised.
The observation was raised really, the conversation was around what management and supervision training occurs in work health and safety, about work and health and safety for managers and supervisors. And so since receiving and before preparing the action plan, I had a discussion with the auditor around I guess it's the key responsibilities of the managers, and so we've already organised for LGIS to facilitate 2 or 3 sessions with our managers. So we've already started on that process. It was more around an education training for our managers and our supervisors about their responsibilities in the work health and safety area.
So just as a follow-up, are we sort of saying that we haven't had formal and structured training on work health and safety roles? Because I recall
yes,
updates provided that
through your chair, yes, we actually have, and that has been at the strategic or the senior management team meetings. We've had training there. This is going to be probably more targeted in terms of the topics that are covered. That's the plan moving forward.
Through you, Madam Chair, the HR manager has actually been very diplomatic. As you're probably aware, when the auditors are going through doing the audit, so they're looking at our processes and policies and that we have in place, which, as you know, are very good. They're then looking to see how people then pick up on those and then enact those. What's probably lacking at this point in time, so even though the managers have had some training, it hasn't sort of gone through as to what their responsibilities are, so they're just not connecting to it fully. So we're going to do some more refresher training with them and actually lay it out quite clearly what their responsibilities and duties are, which is why we're bringing LGIS in. So they're looking to see, you've got your policy, you've got your process here, are you doing it here? And on a couple of occasions, people just didn't remember that we have got this and what their responsibility was.
I think maybe through the chair, just as a follow-up, I suppose when we receive recommendations, need to be quite sort of careful when we're receiving those, that the actual recommendation or the gap is sort of clear, because I suppose reading it independently, it looks like we haven't had formal structured training, as opposed to that there might be gaps in understanding. So I think quite a few of these are, well, this report in particular looks like it's a cookie cutter type of recommendation that's ticked a box. It's not specific tailored to Sir Kwinana, so I suppose the challenge is if we're getting these to, yeah. Maybe it's a similar query, but on page 353, there's an insufficient finding around work activities and that workers have a thorough understanding of when safe work method statements or Take 5 assessments are required.
Through the chair, so it is a bit of a disappointing finding because we did bring in a consultant to really help the team understand how the Take Fives work and when to use them. We have written out a process for Take Five, and that formal process has now been in place, or maybe even up to a year, possibly. But the confusion has come about because we use safe work method statements more than we need to, because they're quite a valuable document, and it's created confusion because the safe work method statement does sit in place of a Take Five when you start a workday. And where we are using a safe work method statement where we don't need to, we might use a safe work method statement for an entire week, as opposed to in a high risk situation where we wouldn't do that. And that is leading to some confusion with the team, notwithstanding they have a written process for how to use a Take Five. So what the action for us is to do is to take all the safe work method statements that are not required to be safe work method statements by the regulations and rename them and make modifications to them, so we can really spell out to the team the difference between a safe work method statement that is required by law and the ones that aren't, where you continue to use the Take Five system with them.
That makes sense. And I suppose that so the knock-on impact of that will be further understanding and clarifications when to use the right tools.
Yeah, that's right. It will really focus on, so it's only for the high risk work where we are required to have the safe work method statements, but we've tried to expand them because they're a valuable tool. But yes, it will really clarify it.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, no further comments from me.
So, looking at page 340, I do commend the overall score of 93%. However, where we are the lowest, albeit still a high score, is around training and supervision, equal to planning. But in reading the recommendations, I guess I had a misunderstanding of how far our workplace health and safety training has gone throughout the organisation. And if I'm to understand, it's to supervisor level. Is it to manager? It is to manager level. Is it to supervisor level at this point in time?
At this point in time, I can tell you that the city have 39 training courses, different training courses that are in the work health and safety space for different people across the organisation. In the last year, we've had 1,098 staff, 1,098 training interactions across all of our staff. So there is access to a lot of work health and safety training. A lot of our staff perhaps don't appreciate, and it's been included in our staff development reviews, exactly what constitutes work health and safety training. For example, EEO training, bullying, that sort of stuff. That's just been released today. We've sent out to all of our staff, including our casuals, 4 modules to complete. So there's the recognition or the non-recognition of what actually constitutes work health and safety training.
Including psychosocial.
Yes, including psychosocial hazards. So we've identified that. Overall, in the last year, we've offered 39 different training courses in that space. It could be fire warden training, it could be first aid, it could be psychosocial hazard training, a lot of different courses. So there is a lot of work health and safety training that occurs. And sometimes our staff, when questioned by the auditor, didn't recognise that that was work health and safety training.
I see. Okay. So, I guess the opportunity is have a better understanding of, is the training hitting the mark? Is it meeting our legal and ethical obligations? And is it getting to everyone? Because it's absolutely essential that it be top down, but it's really important that everyone is aware of the importance of workplace health and safety. So it's an opportunity for reflection and review.
For sure, and part of that reflection and review is that making sure that that's in their position descriptions as well, so
Yep.
that they understand that, and that's the essential criteria, and so that was sort of part of the audit as well.
The a question was raised about how this committee keeps an oversight to fulfil our responsibilities with respect to progress, and I'm comfortable with it being separate to the audit findings, but I think it would be useful if these findings not only have what is to be done, but sort of specific reference to the position of the person who's actually responsible for it, and also a planned date, and then we'll be able to keep track of how it's going. Okay, thank you. Anything further from the committee? Thank you, Mr. Arnold.
Just a question around the safety statistics report, which is attached also. There's 13 total injuries in the period. There was 3 lost time injuries. So I just want to get maybe like a basic overview of those 3 lost time injuries.
One lost time injury was in relation to a worker using a portable saw, cut the end of their finger, and the lost time injury was 1.5 shifts for that particular injury. It didn't need stitching. They just took some time off work there. Another lost time injury was in relation to the axle breaking off a trailer as somebody was turning out onto the road, and they went to move part of the trailer and twinged their back, and I think it was a one shift away from work. And the other lost time injury was in the library when a staff member was moving a display, and again twinging in the back. As she felt a bit twinging in the back, went to the physio the next day, and then was back at work on a return to work program. Since then, we have also organised with LGIS to come and start a refresher training for our manual handling, because we've noted that they were both back injuries, and that we already do manual handling when training when an employee starts with us. We've now got a program for refreshing that manual handling training as well.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the update. And yeah, so process-wise, obviously you have your internal work with health and safety committees and processes, etc. Maybe through the chairs, just a suggestion for any higher order sort of injuries that we have, like lost time injury, restricted work injury, etc., that we just have a short summary of what that details are, which I think has been part of other reports. Just gives a greater sort of context, and that can be just within the summary information. That would be great. Thank you. No further questions for me.
I think on reflection, a broken axle could potentially be a very serious incident. Someone cutting themselves could be a very serious incident. So I'm interested in understanding what additional training or responses would be appropriate in that area, if any.
Through the chair, our normal process is to investigate every incident, but we also look at the potential consequence. So the cutting of the finger, it was a mini chainsaw that is operated with one hand, and the problem with that is it does leave your other hand, as opposed to a normal chainsaw, it leaves your other hand to get in the way. And even the employee recognised that when I went and had a chat to the individual, that is a risk with that particular tool. So since that point, we've decided until we come up and we're satisfied it's safe, it's not being used. So that tool is being stood down until such time as we're satisfied it can be used safely. And they are trialling a reciprocating saw, which is substantially safer, not likely to take a finger off, and certainly it doesn't carry the same risk of a jam blade or kickback that a mini chainsaw does.
Did the person have gloves?
Yes,
Protective
it did cut through the gloves, yeah. The other one, the broken axle, it's an issue with build quality of the trailer. We've had a couple of issues with two trailers that arrived about the same time from the same manufacturer. The challenge with it is you can't sit there and nail down every single defect in the trailer. So the plan with those two trailers is to retire them early and then replace.
Thank you. It's useful information. If there are no further questions, we'll move to the recommendation. I'm happy to move from the chair and second it. Thank you very much. Councillor Acker. And vote. All those in favour? Nil against. Any items of late or urgent business? Nothing. If not, thank you very much for your attendance and participation this evening. I'll declare the meeting closed.